Super Mario Bros. 2 has been a speedrunning classic for years. It was one of the most popular games back in its era. But in order to beat the game as quickly as possible, you need to master precise platforming, a variety of mechanics, and some of the craziest tricks on the NES. The history of Mario 2's world record spans back over a decade and a half. During that time, some of the greatest players to ever pick up an NES controller had their turn with the record. For at least a period of time, they could say they were the best in the world at a Nintendo classic. This is the world record history of Super Mario Bros. 2. As with most games, it's nearly impossible to determine the earliest world records for Super Mario Bros. 2. It's likely that people beat the game in under 15 minutes in the late 80s and 90s, but with no video proof, it's hard to determine that for certain. However, as far as recorded runs go, some of the earliest ones on the internet seem to date back to 2005, a trio of runs by some of the best speedrunners of the era. The fastest one was from August 2005, clocking in at 9 minutes and 42 seconds, performed by Scott Kessler. As far as speedrunners from the mid-2000s go, the early ages of speedrunning, Scott Kessler was simply legendary. He held records in Super Mario Bros., Super Mario World, Metroid, and various other games. His Super Mario Bros. 2 record was just one of many, but it was a really good one. Here's how it went. You're given a choice of 4 characters for each level in Mario 2. Peach and Mario are never used, since they're slow and can't jump very high. Scott Kessler chose Luigi for 1-1 since he jumps the highest, which allowed him to reach platforms high in the level and make it into the underground quickly. Once he used the bomb to get through the door, he arrived at the Birdo fight that appears at the end of most levels. You've got to hit Birdo with 3 eggs, and an egg is fired every 256 frames from when the stage begins. That means that you can arrive at Birdo anytime within a 256 frame window, or about 4 seconds, and not lose any time. There's an analogy for this involving a particular 4-wheeled vehicle of transportation. If this vehicle leaves from a station every 256 frames, then it doesn't matter if you arrive there a frame before it leaves, or 255 frames before. As long as you're within that window, you'll catch the same 4-wheeled vehicle of transportation. Kessler was able to barely make the cycle and arrive right when the first egg was fired, then quickly threw the other 2 to defeat Birdo. Up next was 1-2. Where Luigi was once again picked to jump across large gaps at the start of the stage. Kessler pretty much never stopped holding the run button, just tapping A at the right times to jump without slowing down. The Birdo fight was more of the same, waiting for 3 eggs to be shot, then throwing them as quickly as possible. In 1-3, Kessler switched to Toad because he has a very bizarre but useful mechanic. If an enemy or other heavy object is picked up with Toad, he runs much faster than normal. He's the only character in the game with that property, so he can be incredibly useful for running through levels quickly. Kessler ran through much of the level with a Shy Guy above Toad's head, then threw a potion on top of the vase to warp to World 4. World 4-1 was pretty straightforward. Kessler picked up an enemy and ran with him, jumping to avoid enemies in his way. There's a rocket in the middle of the stage that operates on a similar global timer to Birdo's eggs. It can only take off to send you to the next part of the stage every 64 frames. As long as you arrive within a 64 frame window, you'll never lose time here. 4-2 was similar, picking up an enemy with Toad and dodging everything else. He picked up a potion again in this stage to warp to World 6, although he had some slowdowns along the way. World 6 is where the game really takes a big step up in difficulty. In 6-1, Kessler used Toad to pick up a Cobra and run through the stage as best he could. It was really hard to do so quickly given the placement of the other enemies. He then went underground and had to dig to pick up a key. Digging quickly required precise rhythm to not lose time, as did jumping out of the sand once he had the key. Birdo was quickly defeated with a mushroom block, then it was on to 6-2. Kessler went back to Luigi here and then slowly rode on that albatross over part of the gap. It took a long time, but it was safe. He then jumped on other enemies to get across the rest of the pit to the Birdo fight at the end. Kessler went back to Toad for 6-3, and at the start he waited until he was under the sand to run under the wall to get to a door. He then made it to Birdo, whom he quickly defeated with mushroom blocks, and then the World 6 boss, Triclyde, where he jumped up and threw a mushroom block 3 times to defeat him. On to World 7, the last world in the game. 7-1 features a lot of large jumps, so Kessler used Luigi again. He caught a rocket to go to the next screen, then climbed up a series of ladders and platforms. It helps to have Luigi here to gain vertical distance quickly, but Kessler still had to hesitate a fair amount. Finally, after yet another Birdo fight, it was on to the final stage, 7-2. This is the longest level in the game, featuring an outdoor section, a long indoor section, and a few boss fights. However, Kessler is able to skip over much of the level by performing a trick where you jump off a ladder to the ceiling and run across the various rooms. He made his way past a Birdo to the Hawkmouth fight, where he hit him with a mushroom block 3 times. Then, it was on to the final boss, Wart. Vegetables are shot every 256 frames, sort of like how the eggs work on Birdo. You need to hit him with a vegetable when his mouth opens 6 times. Kessler got the first 4 hits, had to retreat and delay the 5th hit a cycle, then got the 6th hit to finish him off. And just like that, he had completed Super Mario Bros. 2 in just 9 minutes and 42 seconds. The route was simple enough. Start in World 1, warp to World 4, then warp to World 6, and play World 6 and 7 to finish the game. Kessler submitted the run to both Speed Demos Archive and Twin Galaxies, the 2 leading speedrun websites at the time. And that's where their recorded record stood. It was an imperfect run, with small slowdowns in nearly every level. But it was a start, and it stood as the world record, unchallenged for months. But over the following 2 years, he would be beaten twice. The first guy to do it was a runner named Chris Knight, better known as Cac. In August 2006, he got a 9:19, a 23-second improvement. Most of the time saves came in the back half of the run. He picked up a couple of seconds in World 4 from hesitating less while carrying the potion, and in 6-2, rather than slowly riding the albatross, he sped it up by jumping across. However, the bulk of his time save came in the last stage, 7-2. He used Toad instead of Luigi, so he saved some time by picking up enemies and running with them. The rest of the stage was improved too. Less hesitation, a faster Hawkmouth kill, and a faster Wart kill. So that was a pretty big improvement. But a year later, in June 2007, the record would be lowered again. The runner's name this time was Andrew G, a guy who would go on to hold the Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Super Mario World records, in some cases for years. Just a legendary Mario speedrunner. His Super Mario 2 time was 9:15, a 4-second improvement over Cac's run. But there was something different about this one. 3 years later, it was still standing strong at the top of the leaderboard. What made this run so good? Well, in World 1, he matched Cac's fast execution and added in this potion throw in 1-3. Instead of carefully placing the potion on top of the vase, Andrew went for a throw from far away to avoid slowing down. He timed it perfectly and it worked. Although he accidentally got hit in 4-1, he made the time back up in 4-2 from jumping off the first ladder. By precisely jumping off the side of a ladder to go higher, you can get to the top faster than having to slowly climb it. In 7-1, he used this trick to his full advantage, flying up the long vertical section in the middle of the level. After a 7-2 that matched Cac's run, Andrew had himself a 9:15. He celebrated in a Speed Demos Archive forum thread, and then the record just sort of went dormant. This was still in the pretty early ages of speedrunning, so games having big gaps between records was still pretty common. But for a game like Super Mario Bros. 2, a record standing that long was a big deal. However, in October 2010, the run was finally beaten. The runner this time was Menbu93, who's best known in the speedrunning community for his legendary Super Mario World record from 2013.
Itasso! Itasso!
3 years prior, however, he managed to beat Andrew's Mario 2 record, but only by 1 second, with a 9:14. Interestingly, this run was slower than Andrew's in a lot of ways. There were a handful of sloppy mistakes, and he wasn't able to perform the fast ladder jumps in 7-1 like Andrew was. But where Menbu's run shined through was with a couple of major new strategies. One was his Birdo kill in 6-2, where he was very aggressive and stacked mushroom blocks to hit Birdo quickly. The other big one was in 6-3. Instead of slowly sinking into the sand and running under the wall, Menbu did this. He threw a Shy Guy to have him rebound, and jumped off of him at just the right time to make it over the wall. It saved 4 seconds over the older, slower route, and ultimately was enough to just barely beat out Andrew's 9:15. And that was the state of Mario 2 speedrunning in the early 2010s. You might be noticing a pattern here. A record would be set, and then a couple years would pass without any activity. By 2012, the only record from the past 5 years was Menbu's 9:14. It was a bizarre dilemma. Rather than speeding up, the community's growth had drastically slowed down. They needed something new. So, in 2012, a group of players decided to shake things up. Before then, most players were submitting their Mario 2 runs to Twin Galaxies, and one of Twin Galaxies' staple rules was that glitches aren't allowed, which severely limits the possibilities for many speedruns. So, that summer, Mario 2 speedrunners decided to just ignore that rule, and start doing runs with glitches. And it's a good thing they did, because as it turns out, Super Mario Bros. 2 is one of the most broken games on the NES. Once this decision was made, Mario 2 runners suddenly had a bunch of new material to work with. Some of these tricks have been known about for years, but were specifically forbidden by Twin Galaxies, like the double jump. By running off the corner of an enemy and jumping, the game thinks you're still standing on it even while you're in the air. So, if you press A again, you'll be able to jump once more and gain additional height. This trick had a few uses across the run, but was most important in World 1-1. By using the double jump to get to the top, you could use Toad instead of Luigi and run through the rest of the stage faster. Other tricks were a bit more complicated, like this warp in 1-1. So what happened here? Well, it was Andrew G's variation of a glitch that Richard Ureta first used in a tool-assisted speedrun all the way back in 2005. Mario 2 has a very strange property where if you're in an invincible state and are climbing a ladder, an enemy landing on you automatically reverses your direction. So, what you can do is intentionally get hit by the Shy Guy to enter an invincible state, then pick it up, run over to the ladder, and throw it. Once you're at the bottom of the ladder, you really quickly grab it to start climbing, and when the Shy Guy hits you, your direction reverses and you climb through the bottom of the floor. The game thinks you've legitimately moved on to the next screen, so it puts you right outside the Birdo fight as if you'd gotten there normally. Compared with the old method of picking up the bomb and blowing up the barrier to the door, this glitch was certainly faster than before, and it was enough to reach Birdo an egg cycle earlier to save a full 5 seconds. Finally, in 1-2 there was one last glitch. This one was discovered by Control-Alt-Destroy in November 2009. If you hop on the carpet, then move to the left to respawn another one, when it appears, you can approach it from the side and pick up the Pidgey. The combination of two carpet sprites on screen and the fact that Toad is holding the Pidgey means the carpet will then move in hyperspeed. You can fly to the end of the level and potentially get to Birdo a cycle sooner. These glitches combined could save over 10 seconds, and the other stages weren't entirely optimized either. So, a final time under 9 minutes was conceivable given the current record of 9:14. The question was, who was going to get there first? Well, in August 2012, a player named Sven was able to get closer, beating Menbu's run by 3 seconds. Unfortunately, although this run was live-streamed on Twitch, he never saved the broadcast, so video of it no longer exists. However, this run wouldn't stand for too long anyway, because later that same month, an old school runner came back. On August 25th, 2012, Andrew G posted this time. This was the first ever recorded sub 9 minute run of Super Mario Bros. 2, and it was legendary. He built up a 7-second lead over the record in World 1 from the new glitches and cleaning up mistakes from Menbu. But the time saves didn't stop there. Menbu fell down the ladder in 7-1 and had a relatively slow Hawkmouth kill in 7-2, allowing Andrew to save another 9 seconds. Between the glitches and the World 7 time saves, it was enough to get him an incredible 8:58. This run would end up standing for a few months. It was daunting to try to get out of World 1 with all the tricks needed to hit, and even if you did, the next 7 levels weren't much easier. But in November 2012, somebody else came back. This time, it was Kak. And on November 18th, he managed to get an 8:52, beating Andrew by 6 seconds. Most of his time saves came in the back half of the run, like when he successfully executed a throw on Warts that Andrew missed. It was the first time in 5 years that Kak officially held the Mario 2 record. But there was something very special about this run. Remember how in Andrew's 8:58, the run that Kak beat, he double jumped in 1-1, clipped through the ground with the Shy Guy, and did the carpet trick in 1-2? Well, Kak didn't do any of that. He beat Andrew's 8:58 with a glitch-free 8:52. So, how did he do it? Well, Kak lost 5 seconds in 1-1 because he didn't do the warp, meaning he got to Birdo an egg cycle later. But in Andrew's 1-2, he was actually barely slow enough to miss making it to Birdo a cycle earlier, meaning he didn't save any time over a glitch-free stage. So, Kak managed to not lose any time there. Even with a glitch-free World 1, he was only 5 seconds behind Andrew. And from there, Kak had some time he knew he could save. Andrew had hesitated a bit in 6-2 while jumping across the gap, and had a slow Birdo kill where he missed the throw. Kak was able to improve in both areas and save 4 more seconds. But the biggest time save in the entire run was in 7-2. As was mentioned before, he saved 5 seconds from hitting a throw on Wart that Andrew missed. However, he saved another 5 seconds from arriving at Wart fast enough to catch an earlier vegetable cycle. Just like Birdo's eggs, Wart's vegetables are shot out every 256 frames. By tightening his movement in 7-2, he was able to scrape just enough time saved together to arrive at Wart a couple seconds sooner, catching the early vegetable. In total, he saved 10 seconds in the last stage, allowing him to beat Andrew's record without glitches. As it turns out, CAC reportedly had gotten times as low as 8:54 back in 2010, but didn't always record them. So, that begs the question. If CAC could get times in the low 850s without glitches, what could he do with them? As you'd expect, messages of congratulation poured in from across the community. This was 20 seconds ahead of his glitchless run. It was by far the greatest run of Super Mario Bros. 2 ever performed. Just like Andrew's run, he saved 5 seconds in 1-1 from doing the warp. In 1-2, he added in an additional trick to save even more time. After riding on the carpet, he threw a potion on top of a veggie and went in the door. He then immediately left, and on the first frame possible after leaving, he picked up the veggie beneath him. This caused it to get stuck in his head, rather than being carried like normal. Typically, veggies can't be carried from room to room. However, since it was stuck in his head, this didn't apply. So he was able to take it into the boss room and defeat Birdo with it extremely quickly, saving a whopping 6 seconds over the glitchless route. That meant that coming out of World 1, he was 11 seconds ahead of his record. But it didn't stop there. In 4-1, he did another double jump to avoid having to hesitate. In 6-2, he did multiple double jumps over the long gap to prevent slowdowns. In 6-3, instead of going all the way over to pick up the Shy Guy to jump over the wall, CAC used a strategy invented by Jeff Sledge, where he threw a potion and jumped off of that. And in 7-1, he was able to successfully pull off the fast ladder climbs like Andrew G did. In short, it was remarkable how close to perfection the speedrun was. CAC actually calculated that all remaining possible time save could only lower the record by 6 seconds. That meant that according to CAC, the perfect Mario 2 speedrun would be 8:26. He was that close to perfection. But ultimately, he didn't want to try taking it down any further. CAC's 8:32 was from June 2013. A year later, it was still at the top of the leaderboard, with second place nearly 20 seconds behind. A year after that, nothing had changed. 8:32 was still on top by a mile. It was that good of a run. But then, in September 2015, the record finally got a new challenger. The person's name, fittingly, was I Love Mario. He was a top-level runner of a handful of platformers, including Blaster Master, Mario 3, and Mario World. But in September 2015, I Love Mario started to focus all of his efforts onto Super Mario Bros. 2, and lowered his personal best from the 840s into the 830s. By September 22nd, he was just 3 seconds behind the record. Much of where he was looking to save time over the record was with the Birdo kills in World 6. In 6-1, Birdo actually jumped over CAC's first shot. In total, I Love Mario knew he could save about 4 seconds in World 6 from faster boss kills alone. That took him close to the theoretically perfect 8:26. On September 23rd, he got on a run that was about even with the record after Worlds 1 and 4. He knew he had time left to save. He was gonna try to take down CAC's 8:32. This run would end up finishing with a time of 8:32.1, beating Kak's record by a fraction of a second. I Love Mario was the new world record holder. His biggest notable mistake was in 6-2, when he got caught up on a ledge at the end of the second room. However, he got most of the Birdo kills he was looking for, and the vast majority of the run looked clean. At the very least, it was enough to just edge out Kak's record. But apparently, that wasn't enough for I Love Mario, because the next day, he got an 8:30. It took 2 years for anybody to beat Kak's 832, but it took I Love Mario just 1 day to beat his own 832. This run was virtually identical to his last record, except he cleaned up the mistake in 6-2 to save a bit over a second. The world record was now just 4 seconds away from Kak's hypothetical 826. The record calmed down for a few months after this. I Love Mario had shown his dominance at the category, and a time of 8:30 was good enough for him. But by early 2016, yet another runner would come along. He got his personal best into the 8:30s, and by March 2016, he was at the point where he felt he could take the record from I Love Mario. And maybe, just maybe, take it into the 820s. This is BJW. BJW's initial goal wasn't to go for the world record, but once he got close, he found a few imperfections in I Love Mario's run that he thought he could improve. One of the biggest ones was in 6-1. The record's vase room could have been cleaner, especially hopping up out of the sand after grabbing the key. BJW knew he could be quicker and not take such a wide angle, allowing for a smoother trip up to the top. There were also improvements to the Birdo kills he could get by rapid firing the mushroom blocks quicker. With these improvements combined, getting an 829 was feasible, even if the rest of the run wasn't absolutely perfect. So he got to work. On March 7th, he had a run that gained a second in World 1 from a really fast Birdo kill. He also gained a second in 6-1 from a faster transition after picking up the key. So, going into World 7, BJW had a shot at pulling this off. As he flew through the last world, the gravity of the situation suddenly became very real to him. He could do this.
Guys. Yes! Yes, 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 yes!
Well, that certainly was a sub 830. As it turns out, his World 7 was nearly flawless. He dashed up the ladders in 7-1, nailed 7-2, and had the perfect wart kill at the end. But as great as it was, BJW still wasn't entirely satisfied with this record.
It's not over yet, guys. This game needs an 827 at least. It's not over, but the first hard part's done.
So BJW acknowledged that 827 was possible. But what about Kak's original perfect time of 826? Well, we have to break down the run and look at what time was left to be saved. In 1-3, it was possible to grab the snippet at the start of the stage from below so that max speed could be achieved earlier. This would save a fraction of a second over the record. It was also possible to be slightly faster at the start of 1-2 when moving on to the second carpet. By cutting the turn back tighter, you could potentially save another fraction of a second. And of course, it was possible to be faster on a couple of the Birdo fights. In 6-2, the orb landed and bounced in the wrong direction for BJW, meaning he had to waste a fraction of a second going to get it. A few other fights could be improved by tiny amounts as well with faster execution. Taking all the aforementioned time saves into account, it was theoretically possible to take the record down to 826 and match Kak's theoretical perfect time. And when I Love Mario came back later that month to take the record from BJW, he realized that the 826 might not be that unreasonable after all. On May 27th, 2016, I Love Mario made history. It wasn't just an 826. It was a low 826. He got the sniff it grab, the Birdo kills, the ladder jumps, the glitches, and all the movement. CAC's 826 had happened. Truth be told, 826 wasn't a perfect time anymore, since a couple new minor strategies had been discovered since CAC came up with it. But it represented a time approaching the limits on what was possible. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this was one of the best speedruns in the world when it was performed. And it stood on top alone. A nearly unbreakable world record. But incredibly, in October 2017, he actually topped it. The time saves were very minimal. In 4-2, he was able to get a higher ladder jump at the start to get to the top quicker. He also once again saved fractions of a second on the World 6 Birdo fights from tighter execution. But it was just barely enough to get an 825. At this point, I Love Mario's dominance in the category was clear. He was essentially in the same position CAC was in a few years prior, comfortably at the top of the leaderboard, having lowered the record several times in a row over the course of years, with no real rival. But it was at this point in time, in October 2017, that the story takes an interesting turn. During that month, an up-and-coming challenger lowered his personal best to 5 seconds behind the record, and decided he was gonna try to beat it. The problem was, the remaining time saves were getting extremely minimal. But if there was anyone who could do it, it was this guy. He was a Super Mario World speedrunning champion, with records in numerous categories. This is Green Death Flavor, also known as GDF. Again, there really wasn't anything new GDF could do to help him out. The key to beating the record was going to be tiny optimizations. Cleaner movement at the start of 1-2, grabbing the sniff it that I Love Mario had missed, and as always, small Birdo optimizations. And on top of that, he would have to take 5 seconds off his personal best to beat the record. It took over 2 years for the record to be lowered by 5 seconds. GDF was going to try to do it in a fraction of that time. And on October 28th, 2017, he got on this run. It looked like pretty much a tie. The world record was 825.81. That meant, it was time for a frame count. When speedruns are extremely close in length, human error on stopping the timer means it's hard to tell if a run was actually the record or not. So, GDF now had to go back and carefully see exactly when the run began and finished to get the exact time of the run. The time to beat was 8:25.81.
Oh man, it's still at 24. Now it's at 25. Walk. Walk. Please walk. Please walk. Please walk. Alright, no. Oh.
Just 4 frames off of the world record. A crushing run. But ultimately, GDF would never get a run this close to the world record again. He stopped grinding, and I Love Mario's 825 continued to stay on top for months. Over the next year or so, there wasn't much movement at the highest levels. The record was so optimized, it was getting incredibly hard to take any time off of it. But in October 2018, yet another old runner came back. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew G had returned. Only this time he wasn't coming back to do new runs. He was coming back to drop a bombshell of a new strategy. See, back in 2011, Andrew G had worked on a tool-assisted speedrun of Mario 2 with Aglar, coming up with a bunch of theoretical strategies that were too precise or difficult to be done by humans. One of those was an extremely fast way to complete 1-1. For 7 years, this trick remained impossible for runners to do in real time. But in 2018, Andrew G revisited it, and came up with a way to do it. It was extremely difficult, undoubtedly the hardest trick in the whole run. But it was possible. It started with a potion. Remember the veggie glitch in 1-2, where you could get a vegetable stuck in your head to carry to the next room? Well, in 1-1, you had to do that with a POW block. It would then be stored in the game's memory and appear when you entered the next room. But remember, this trick only had a 1-frame window to work, or a 60th of a second. Then, once you were in the underground, you'd jump up to the Shy Guy and throw the POW block. With a POW block throw, you have a 2-frame window to store an enemy if you pick it up at the right time. That's what you could do with the Shy Guy. Even though it doesn't look like you're picking it up, it goes in the game's memory, just like the POW block did on the last screen. Finally, to clip through the floor to the next room, you had to get underneath 2 bombs, have one land on your head at the bottom, then climb up the ladder while the other lands on you. Just like with the last clip, this will cause you to climb through the bottom of the floor onto the next screen. When you arrive, you'll be holding the Shy Guy from before. By throwing it at the right time, it can bounce 3 times to defeat Birdo much quicker than normal. Doing all of this could save about 4 seconds in 1-1, but think of all that has to go right. A 1-frame trick, then some precise movement, a 2-frame trick, careful maneuvering to get the bomb clip, then a super precise throw with the Shy Guy. 1-1 would very quickly develop a reputation as being a jail level, because hardly any record-paced run would escape it. With a 4-second improvement to the first level, the world record now had major potential to be lowered. When Andrew found this setup in September 2018, there were 2 active runners at world record level. The first was the record holder himself, I Love Mario. The second was a relatively new runner to Mario 2, but a person who had one of the greatest speedrunning resumes in the world. The Mega Man world record holder, the Mega Man 2 world record holder, the Strider world record holder, top 10 in Mega Man 3, top 10 in Castlevania, even 13th place in the coveted Pringles All A's % on Sega Genesis. This runner's name, very fittingly, was Cool Kid. In October 2018, I Love Mario and Cool Kid were both doing runs with the new 1-1 strats, but it would be I Love Mario who struck initially. On October 1st, he beat the record by 2 seconds with an 8:23, gaining 4 seconds in 1-1 but bleeding some time in 1-2 and 7-2. The very next day, however, another massive world record cut from I Love Mario. He managed to gain almost a full second in 1-1 because the orb didn't bounce far away from him, and another second in 1-2 because he fixed the slow start from the last record. Cool Kid was in a pretty tough spot now, being 5 seconds behind I Love Mario, but all he could do was keep trying. 10 days after I Love Mario's 8:20, Cool Kid got a run going that was a bit behind after 1-1 because he missed a jump after the warp. But he made the time up in World 4 from cleaning up a mistake from I Love Mario and a new power squat jump strategy to go higher on the ladder. However, he'd fall behind in World 6 thanks to a couple of slightly sloppy Birdo kills. Going into World 7, he needed some time save to have a shot at the record. So he decided to go for something incredibly risky, a trick known as Fast 7-1. Remember how rockets can only take off every 64 frames? Well, Fast 7-1 involves playing as fast as possible to catch an earlier rocket. GDF was the first player to experiment with this trick. The most important part is on the second screen, where you have to precisely jump toward the albatross right away rather than waiting, then quickly switch to left to make it to the post. You can see here how much faster you have to be than the old method. If done properly, you can barely make it to the earlier rocket and save the 64 frames. Unfortunately, it was incredibly difficult. But Cool Kid had no choice but to go for it if he wanted the world record.
Oh my god, alright. Sub 820 pace.
As it turns out, Fast 7-1 was enough for a new record of 820.55.
Alright. I mean, not by full second, but...
For the first time in 2.5 years, Mario 2 had a new record holder. Cool Kid was able to add another record to his list. And 8 days later, he'd do it again.
That's pretty good.
So, Cool Kid had won out in the world record battle. Both he and I Love Mario stopped playing after this 8:19, with I Love Mario trailing Cool Kid by just 1 second. And for the next year, that's where the world record stood. An 8:19 was incredibly strong, and without a new strategy, beating it would take a lot of effort. But then, as it happened so many times in this game's history before, that new strategy they were looking for was discovered. It was once again in 1-1, but this time it was much simpler than before. It turned out that you could throw the POW block sooner in the underground to start the process of the warp earlier. This not only saved time from getting to the next screen quicker, but also allowed for another time save. With the old strategy, you used to have to jump into the pole after the Shy Guy grab to slow down, because if you reach the end too quickly, Birdo would actually jump over the Shy Guy throw because of the point in the pattern you were at. The time save in the cave, however, meant that you were so fast that you'd reach Birdo before that point in the pattern. So you didn't have to intentionally slow down at the pole, and could save some additional time there. In total, the improvements to 1-1 could save another 1.5 seconds. That was enough to bring Cool Kid back. In November 2019, he had a run that successfully saved time in 1-1, and although the rest of the run was up and down, the new 1-1 strat was enough to knock the record down to 8:17.
Thanks for the GGs, guys.
As you could probably tell from Cool Kid's wild reaction, this was a really solid record. In addition to the new 1-1 time save, he also managed to hit Fast 7-1 to save a bit more time. So now it was I Love Mario's turn. And a week later, he got an 8:18 to move to 1 second behind Cool Kid. But he had trouble saving all the time he needed. So, entering into 2020, Cool Kid's 8:17 was still on top of the leaderboard. That is, until January 17th. On that day, I Love Mario had a run going that was about even with the record coming out of World 1. He gained over half a second in 4-1 because Cool Kid had missed the double jump, but lost it back in 7-1 from missing the fast rocket. It ended up being about enough to cancel out, so when I Love Mario stopped the splits at the end of the run, they read a time that was essentially tied with Cool Kid's world record. Once again, it was time for a frame count. This time, it would go in the runner's favor, just ahead of Cool Kid's 817.4. These two guys had been rivals for years now, and after all that time, their personal bests were separated by just 1/10 of a second. But there was still a bit more time to squeeze out of this record. There was a new strat they could do in 1-2 where they precisely grabbed the Pidgeot from the side, allowing the second one to spawn sooner to get to the end quicker. I Love Mario's ladder movement at the start of 4-2 wasn't as good as it could have been either. And in 7-1, the fast rocket cycle was still possible to achieve. So there definitely was room to take the record lower. And with two competitors at practically the same level, there was no telling who was going to take it there. But on January 26th, 2020, Cool Kid started up a session of Mario 2 world record attempts.
That's really good.
This was the first ever 816 in Super Mario Bros. 2 history. It's also where the world record stands today. But as great as it is, there's a fair amount of time left on the table here. In 6-1, Cool Kid failed to grab the first sand block right away, and in 7-1, he missed the fast rocket. Those two tricks alone could push the record down to 815. But if more tricks can be brought over from the tool-assisted speedrun, who knows where this record could go? The future of Mario 2 speedrunning is unknown, but bright. Thanks for watching. Hey, thanks for making it to the end. If you enjoyed, it'd mean a lot to me if you could share this video with 1 or 2 other people. It really goes a long way on YouTube, so thank you and Happy New Year.